Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're dialing in from. Thanks for joining us today. We have an update with Canterra Minerals. President Cooper Quinn is going to provide an update on the drill program that they completed in 2021, which they put the results out recently, and what's going on for 2022. I think it's been a few months since we've had an update, so looking forward to hearing what's going on in Newfoundland. This presentation will contain forward-looking statements. If you'd like to know more about those, you can find them on the company's presentation on their website, and there will be a Q&A section at the end. So feel free to input your questions throughout the presentation. You'd think that after doing 300 whatever of these, I have to remember all that. But anyway, Coop, nice to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Deb. It's good to be here. It's 11 o'clock here, so I guess it still counts as morning where I'm sitting.
Well, sorry to be so informal. I've never even asked you if I can call you Coop, but I'm assuming that I can.
Absolutely, lots of people do.
Okay. Anyway, well, why don't you give us a little bit of background on yourself and then maybe a little bit of background on the company and what's been going on?
Yeah, for sure. Myself ultimately, originally, like Canterra CEO Chris Pennempede, a geologist by trade and training that somehow stumbled my way into the boardroom. I think because I could string sentences together in a way that hopefully was helpful for non-technical people to understand technical things. And through the breadth of my career, got my first taste of M&A as a senior geo with Underworld Resources and being acquired by Kinross Gold there. And then worked my way up through kind of some other senior roles, corporate development. And from late 2016 through 2020, there I ran a company called Osprey Gold, which was a company not dissimilar to Canterra, focused in gold exploration in Nova Scotia. And that company then was ultimately acquired by another company in the region at about a 40% premium to market at the time, called Maguma Gold. So pretty familiar with gold exploration out here in Atlantic Canada. So, the extra half hour from Nova Scotia to Newfoundland didn't seem like a tremendous jump. So it's good to kind of be back out in the region. Love the people out there, love the rocks, love the infrastructure, love the access to all the projects and everything like that. So my background is technical, but ultimately I've been, more or less out of the field for the last probably 9 years or so, really, and then been with Canterra since early January here, and I think it's been an exciting time, and it's been great.
I think you have a presentation for us today. Do you want to load that up and
Sure.
Maybe walk us through the basics, and then we can jump into what's new?
Yeah, absolutely. Walk everyone through just kind of an overview of the company here. And I'd say put your hand up and ask questions, but ultimately you'll have to ping Deb for those and we can talk about it after. But we'll just run through kind of where we're at and what we're doing and where we're going. Assuming you can all see that now, we are here focused in gold exploration in Newfoundland. That is an overview of site. One of the things I really like about this is kind of an opening slide is that you can see that there's a road, which obviously for exploration projects in Canada is less common than perhaps you might think, especially if you're working up north, where I've spent a lot of my career. That just adds a lot of cost and complexity to projects, working with helicopters, working with logistics, fixed wing aircraft, and all these kinds of things. So working in a place like Newfoundland, where you can drive to site, where we have an office building that you can drive right to that has a postal address and all these things, actually just really makes things a lot simpler and cheaper, and ultimately helps make exploration easier, and hopefully takes your dollars and stretches them a little bit further into the ground where exploration in gold actually comes from. So as Deb mentioned, I'm a geologist by trade and training, so a few of these things are going to be inferences, and that's a little bit forward looking. And so the team at Canterra here, myself, we kind of went through my background. They're quite similar actually to Chris. I've known him since we went to Simon Fraser together, different companies, but similar roles and similar paths. Our exploration team is really headed up by Luke Longridge, who's a structural PhD, a lot of experience around the globe in consulting. So we saw a lot of different rocks, and that's been a really key piece of the puzzle in trying to unravel some of the things that are happening at Wilding and some of the interplays between some of these big structural scale crustal faults that we'll touch on later in the presentation. We've got Randy to back the board up with a little bit of gray hair, a gentleman who's had his fair share of success around the exploration industry, both in diamonds and in gold, being with SilverQuest Resources and Windspear Diamonds as well. So Randy's been a great addition with a great Rolodex. And speaking of Rolodexes, we've got Andrew Farncombe and Josh Surface kind of on the capital market side side of the company as well. Both younger guys with good backgrounds. Josh works with Integra Resources, and Andrew runs a merchant bank and was with Paradigm before that, and based out in Toronto. So a good mix of guys, young, hungry, go-getters, a bit of gray hair thrown in, and a good mix of diverse skill set between kind of technical side, capital and banking, investor relations, and just good old-fashioned ways to get it done there. So recently, as Deb mentioned in the intro there, we'll touch on these in a little bit greater detail, but just straight off the hop here, these are hot off the press last week. We finished drilling in December 2021, unbelievably, and have finally released those assay results. The delays are entirely due to the lab. Unfortunately, this is a problem that you're seeing across companies in Newfoundland. And I think we've got some processes in place this year for the current results to come out in much speedier fashion. Obviously, 4 to 6 months is pretty much unacceptable on an exploration timeline. It makes planning really, really challenging here. But on the upside, the results, when we finally did get them, we found to be very positive. We had some great results out of Red Ochre with some high-grade results up to 81 grams per ton, and as well some great big broad intercepts of 40 meters of plus of 0.6 grams per ton. All of that's relatively near surface, less than 250 meters depth, and we've extended that strike length at Red Ochre significantly. And then some nice results at the discovery zone at Elm and Alder though as well. So we'll go through all those in a little bit greater depth later in the presentation, and crucially as well. And I'll stress this throughout the entire presentation, but it's all open along strike and at depth. So it's still early stages here and early days here at Wilding. Lots of work yet to be done and lots more mineralization to be discovered, hopefully. Capital structure of the company sitting trading in around 25 cents these days, with about just over 73 million shares outstanding, gives us a market cap just shy of $20 million, and sitting on about $2.5 million in cash right now. Some warrants out there, nothing too crazy. We've got sitting in, I think, some pretty significant shareholders' hands, so good to see that. And we've got, for those significant shareholders, we've got both Eric Sprott in at 18% and Michael Gentile in at 13%. So those guys are great to have on board and big assets to the company as shareholders. Other significant shareholders, you've got Norzinc in at about 9% and Altius in at 6%. Those are both from acquisitions that the company has made throughout its time. And then you've got about a 20% retail float after you take out about 9% for management. So fairly tightly held, not the most liquid stock in the world, but that gives us good torque for the upside as well, with good results and good progress. Where are we in Newfoundland? So as you can see, we're right here, if I can find my mouse, in central Newfoundland, along this big belt here that you can see for the Valentine Lake Shear Zone, which controls this nice northeasterly trend of claims, as you can see, as it controls most of the mineralization in this part of the province. It goes down here from Matador Mining through True Precious, through Marathon Gold, and onto our project here at Wilding Lake. This shear zone is an incredibly massive structure. It trends about 200 kilometers across the province. And this is marked by the Rogerson Lake conglomerate here in red. And this structural corridor has a lot of similarities in the architecture and some of the other geologic underpinnings and foundations of this corridor that it shares them with the Abitibi, which you've probably heard of there, because it's produced over 190 million ounces of gold throughout the Abitibi's history. But really, there's been no incredibly significant production along the Valentine Lake Shear Zone to date. So it's a pretty emerging gold belt at this time, but it does include Marathon Gold's Valentine Lake deposits here, just to the west of Wilding there. So as you can see, Marathon is right here. We have two main projects here that we'll talk about a little bit in the course of this presentation. We've got Wilding here, where most of Canterra's work has been focused to date. And then as well, you go along the shear zone itself to the northeast, and you get onto our Noel-Paul project, which is an earlier stage piece of ground, but very, very large, covers a significant amount of strike length of that shear zone and that structural corridor. And this isn't a piece of ground that we're very, very excited about, but it is earlier stage. And then late last fall, we acquired this small block of ground under an option agreement from Sokoman Minerals that's contiguous with the Wilding block that we call East Alder, that we'll be doing some work on this coming year that we haven't really put any time into East Alder yet. So just to touch on the significance of Marathon and Valentine Lake and how the impacts of that for Canterra. It's the largest undeveloped gold resource in Atlantic Canada. You're looking at about 4.8 million ounces if you add everything all together. That's in 5 deposits there. There's no singular, 5 million ounce deposit here at Marathon. And I think that's quite significant because it means that, these smaller deposits, when you can amalgamate them together, you can put them into a significant mine plan They're looking at a 13-year life of mine with about 175,000 ounces per year. It was some good numbers, a relatively modest capex of about 600 million and an after-tax IRR of 31% at a base case of $1,500 gold. Another piece of this puzzle that I really, really like is that they're still making new discoveries here. They've been working on this piece of ground for quite a bit of time now, but ultimately the Barry discovery was kind of made in 2019, 2020, and it's turned into a nice little deposit of about 600,000 ounces. And they're still putting great drill results out on that. Typically, they have their most recent ones were last week, as well, maybe the week prior. They're putting some nice intercepts out there at Barry still, so still progressing that deposit. And it just shows that how kind of immature this district is and how much discovery there still is to be made, I think. So this is the shear zone in the Rogerson Structural Corridor that you can see here, trending along Marathon's ground, outlined here in blue, and straight on to Wilding here. As we mentioned earlier, with the red ochre, the alder, and the elm zones that we'll look at here. So trending along this corridor here, the shear zone itself is interpreted from some geophysics to the north, on the north of the Wilding property. But the majority of the mineralization that we know to date at Wilding is here along this more southerly structure called the red ochre thrust. That's part of the same complex. And this seems to host so far most of the mineralization at Wilding. I think there's still a lot of work to be done on this shear zone, and still a lot of discovery to be made. But the known gold at this point is here at this red ochre thrust. And as you can see, these multiple deposits kind of scattered like a string along this structure. So at Wilding, the quick history there: discovered in 2015 as part of some forestry road building activities, some gold tourmaline quartz boulders, staked by some local prospectors and ultimately acquired by Altius Minerals. There's pretty significant gold in soil endowment here. As you can see, background being the soil samples that have been done across the property to date. For reference as well, this is that inferred shear zone, and this is the red ochre thrust that I mentioned. As you can see, most of the known mineralization is focused along that thrust right now. Antler Gold drilled 2,600 meters there in 2017, had some pretty significant results. Looking at this 17-meter hit and this 11-meter hit of over a gram and a half are theirs. Those are really great grades and widths, I think, that really attracted the company to this. That's pretty similar to some of the results down there at Marathon that they've put into a cohesive mine plan. But ultimately, when the Canterra picked it up at the beginning of 2021, there was very, very underexplored. There'd been work here at Red Ochre. There'd been here work at Alm and Elder, but the large part of the property had been basically untouched. So the company went in, drilled 16 holes in the winter of 2021. All of those holes in several different zones were successful in discovering gold mineralization. Really focused a lot of the attention in at Red Ochre with some of the results that came out of there. And then the company took a step back and wanted to do some good science and make sure that we advance these things in a very responsible way. So the summer was all about boots on the ground, getting geochemical programs done, doing structural mapping, and really then integrating that into and doing some trenching work as well at surface, and then really integrating into a cohesive understanding of the deposits and going into a fall drill program at the end of last year. So that fall program was about 4,200 meters with 16 holes, again drilled all four main targets being Alder, Elm, Dogberry, and Red Ochre. And what the company saw was at Red Ochre, we saw these large stacked shallowly dipping quartz vein intervals over 30 to 60 meters with sericitic and potassic alteration and sulfides similar to what you see down in parts of Valentine Lake. And so saw that over significant intervals. And then the mineralization in Elm and Alder really stands out quite well because it is pretty traditional stacked quartz veins. You can see visible gold at various points in the core and things like that. But ultimately, we didn't have any results from this program before we decided to go ahead with the current program. That said, once we finally got these results, it was really a validation of that decision to move ahead with the drill program that started a few weeks ago, before we had these results in hand. As we saw these broad zones of stacked quartz veins and pyritic and sericitic alteration had gold mineralization in them. Hole 53 right here, you're looking at 42 meters at 0.6 grams per ton, including 15 meters at 1 gram per ton. And like I said, you have these nice high-grade intercepts as well. Ultimately, in Newfoundland, depending on your understanding of the different exploration stories out there, there can be a focus on these really, really high-grade hits like Newfound Gold and stories like that. That's not really our focus here at Canterra. We are really focused on these broader zones of more open pitable mineralization rather than these narrow vein, high-grade zones. That said, having these high-grade intervals within everything else is nice gravy on top, and we do love to see the high-grade as well. Obviously, it makes for spectacular rocks and great drill intercepts. It's just, I think, highlighting the fact that that's not the primary goal of our exploration target is these very high grades. We're actually looking for broader zones. So, that 15 meters at 1 gram per ton, I actually find almost more exciting than that half meter at 81 grams per ton. So those are the results out of Red Ochre here, and which, like I said, it is open along strike, and holes planned in the ongoing program right now. We'll continue to work this across. We're looking at about 900 meters of known strike of good mineralization at Red Ochre now, and potential to continue to extend that for a couple of kilometers before we get off of our project, and then working that Red Ochre zone to connect it up with Dogberry here as well. It's another couple kilometers away there. So huge strike length potential here at Red Ochre, and then from that fall program as well, there's a couple of holes like this one here, which working to connect these elm and alder zones, and the results show that it looks like these are probably the same mineralizing system. So looking at 900 meters to a kilometer plus of strike length here at elm and alder kind of coming together as well. So I think really, like I said, I think the key for us was these results really validated that moving ahead with the additional drill program before we had these results in hand. And so that was nice to have. And like I said, good to have some more geological data in the database there that we can work into the additional programs.
Can I interrupt?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just wondering, did getting those results back a couple of weeks ago change anything with the current program?
A little bit. So I can touch on that on this slide, but not maybe as much as you might think. So one of the things, we did design the current drill program here on the screen with in mind was we didn't want to hinge anything too much on, we thought we had a pretty good idea of where we hit gold and had good mineralization and things, but we didn't want to hinge anything too much on those results. So one of the things we're working on and where the drill is sitting right now is actually out here at Red Ochre West. So from this lake here down to the south, as you can kind of see in the background, there's a bit of a river there. And basically everything to the west of this river was completely unexplored until last summer when these soil samples were taken. All the data that existed out here until that point was just geophysics. So drilling some of these other targets that weren't contingent necessarily upon results from the previous program was something we did. That said, before we had any of these results in hand, we'd already drilled more holes at Red Ochre, knowing that we were fully confident that those holes were going to come back with good results. What we did have, what was a little disappointing in the fall results there was we drilled these holes here and here in green on this inferred shear zone. So this line is the Valentine Lake shear zone here itself. That was inferred from geophysics and some from geochem work and things like that. So these holes were the first holes in the fall that were drilled on that shear zone on the property ever. It was a bit of a fact-finding mission. Do we have this shear zone on the project? What does it look like? And hopefully we have some mineralization in it. Ultimately, most of the holes that we drilled up there in the fall came back pretty dead. But there's still, what we did find was we do have the shear zone. It does have the same geology on the north and south side of it that it does at Valentine Lake. We did have some quartz veining and some interesting kind of bits and pieces in there, but the assay results, like I said, were a bit disappointing. So that's going to take us back. We're going to kind of rethink our understanding of the shear zone up there. There's still a couple kilometers left of it up here. It doesn't kill anything, but it was a bit of a kind of disappointment. So kind of changing our thinking, and like these holes here, we're still kind of debating if we're going to drill these at the tail end of this program or not, or if we want to take this summer to really understand that shear zone better and how those holes that we did drill kind of fit into the bigger picture and the geologic story there. So it did change, and it both did and didn't change what we're focused on with this drill program here.
Thanks for letting me interrupt.
Yeah, anytime. And so what we're working on here with this 4,000 meter program right now, as I mentioned, really continuing to expand this strike length at Red Ochre. And as you can see, if we're successful all the way from kind of west to east here to connect this connection over to Dogberry, we'd be looking at about 4 kilometers of strike length, which is quite enormous, honestly. And working on, finding higher grade zones within that. And these are all pretty big step out holes. Right now, we're still really focused on what are the extents of this mineralization, how big are these deposits, and then we can refine our understanding of exactly how they all fit together. And one of the stories we're putting together at the Thrust here with our structural geologist there, Luke, is zones and areas where because of this thrust and how it's come across and over like that, areas where we may have, zones of veining that have been stacked on top of each other for increased widths. So some exciting pieces of that puzzle kind of still yet to be determined, but right now really focused on
how wide is that spacing?
Those are 100-meter step outs, so quite significant, I think. And where these holes will be adjusted a little bit as we go through the program, based on what we're seeing in the core and everything. Like I said, I think we have a pretty good understanding now of what good mineralization at Red Ochre looks like, and that helps really refine the drill program quite a bit. And then these holes at Red Ochre West, what we're calling here across the river, those are quite exciting. That's where I see the potential, at Red Ochre here and at Dogberry, as you expand these things with strike length and, width and grade and things like that. It's great. You're adding potential ounces in a resource down the road into this deposit. But really, when you start to add other potential deposits like Red Ochre West or like these targets along the western extent of the shear zone up there, that's where we really start to multiply. You start to add whole deposits, and you go from, this went from making numbers up, and these aren't indicative of anything. Let's say we have 600,000 ounces, and now we have 700,000 ounces. You're going, okay, we have 600,000 ounces, and now maybe we have another 600,000 ounces down here. So it starts to get really exciting. The story starts to expand really fast as you can add deposits there, which dovetails perfectly into a discussion of Noel-Paul here. So Wilding down here in the southwest, remember that structural corridor, and that Valentine Lake Shear Zone trends along here to the northeast. It covers this enormous piece of ground called Noel-Paul. So what's been done to date on there, as I mentioned, it's a much earlier stage. You have regional soil samples. These are 500-meter spaced soil samples, so enormous soil sample spacing. For those who don't know, a kind of tight soil samples grid could even be 12.5 or 25-meter spacing. So 500 is huge. It's very, very reconnaissance scale stuff. We're just trying to look at this property and say, where does it seem like there's a little bit more gold than other places? And obviously what you can see is there's already some zones that are starting to pop out here, like this Carter Lake block and down here in the southwest. So we'll follow that up with a more refined soil sample grid just to start to zoom in, work those into trenching targets. And then we'll be covering the rest of the project with these soil samples in white that haven't been regional scale sampled yet. To further our understanding here at Noel-Paul, geophysics will be happening here in late May, early June. This will be a heli-mag survey to get detailed mag over this block and over Carter Lake, because those are the pieces of that puzzle we're missing. We have good information for the rest of that block. And again, just working that in, integrating that into the model, taking what we know at Wilding and applying it to Noel-Paul, and trying to just stepwise through the process here to set ourselves up for trenching later in the year, likely down at some of these targets down here in the southwest and at Carter Lake. And then hopefully, you got to make sure that your trench results back up what you think they would, but working that into drilling late in the year. So Noel-Paul's, the story is wide open here, and I think just the size of it alone is a bit daunting, but it's quite exciting at the end of the day. In addition to the 2022 program there at Wilding here and Noel-Paul, late last year, the company had the opportunity to acquire several VMS deposits from a company called Norzinc. Ultimately, the long story short is these were too cheap to pass up. They're great assets. They're very different deposit style and different, they're much further advanced than everything we have at Wilding and Noel-Paul. But, when a great asset comes and looks at you in the face and says, do you want to buy me? You go, for what price? Yes, absolutely. So have they picked these up? There's some pretty significant resources at them. The two main ones kind of being the Merchant and Boomerang there, a couple 100,000 ounces of gold, very significant zinc numbers. And these are something that the company will look to do exploration on later on in the year. There's some great targets from the preliminary kind of work that we've done there that need to be drilled. Not the main focus of the company, but I do think another just exciting asset that we have. And ultimately, this resource kind of puts a nice value underpin on everything else that we have. A couple 100,000 ounces of gold that we know is there. Nice lead, zinc, and some significant silver credits as well. So just kind of a nice foundation, a nice baseline to have in our back pocket there, and lots of exploration work and potential to expand these deposits as well.
Are there any projects in Newfoundland that are similar to those ones that you acquired?
Definitely. Definitely. Actually the Duck Pond mine was operated by Teck for years and years and years and years, and it's just going through the final phases of reclamation. Is quite nearby. If I look at So you can see Duck Pond here, just along from Noel-Paul there. It was operated for a significant period of time. It was a VMS deposit as well. And there was a mine up here at Buckins called Buckins Junction that is similar. And then as you trend along off to the northeast, there's some other VMS deposits as well. So there's a lot of these similar deposits that you could potentially look at some kind of amalgamation at down the road, or there's a lot of different options and opportunities, I think, for this VMS style mineralization in the province. So what's our kind of 2022 high-level overview look like? As you can see in the background there, just once again, to really belabor the point, these are Marathon's known deposits here. Follow those green lines, which is the Valentine Lake Shear Zone on the other side of that Rogerson Structural Corridor, which manifests as the Red Ochre Thrust as you come through Wilding here. And just you can see how much strike length at Noel-Paul we have there of this corridor. It's quite significant. So working on that belt scale regional targeting there at Noel-Paul, doing that geophysics work, doing those geochemical sampling, soil samples, and then working that into trenching and generating those into drill targets. And then at Wilding, we will be doing a small IP program here as well across both major structures in the near term. That's with a partner with some adjacent ground. Then we're working at trenching targets at East Alder here, which is that block we optioned from Sokoman that's received almost no work since we acquired it. And then working that, integrating all that in, doing some good old-fashioned boots on the ground work again, and looking to drill in the fall here again. So, like I said, to look at exploration as a bit of a conveyor belt, and you got to just continually be advancing fresh targets through, as well as advancing the known ones that you have, like Red Ochre and Alder. Catalysts for folks looking at why would I buy this story now? I think those results from the 2021 program were great. So if you believe in those, and you believe that we thought those were going to be the right thought those were going to be what they were. I think that's a good kind of buy point for people to get a good wrap their heads around a little bit about what to expect in the future. We're currently drilling, which is always exciting and always a good time, I think, to pick up, dip your toe into the water. It's about 4,000 meters. Like I said, we've changed a bunch of the processes in the lab, so hopefully these results will be out in the order of a couple of months, not the order of 4 to 6 months, because that's just really challenging, as we kind of discussed there. So the drills are turning. I don't know how much more exciting it gets than that. Ultimately, I was out there last week, and it was great to see. Great to see everything's kind of melting out as well. The snow's kind of going away, so they're really gearing up for that exciting summer season. But dovetailing that, leading that off with geochemistry and geophysics here for target generation, and then hit it hard for the summer here with target generation at Noel-Paul and at Wilding. So I think there's a bunch of exciting things kind of happening and going on in the company right now. So a good time to get out in front of people, and a good time for people to kind of take a deep dive. And as you're about to do a Q&A here as well, but I try to make myself very accessible for anyone who wants to give me a call or shoot me an email. Please do so. If you're a shareholder or not, let me see if I can convince you. And if you have any questions, let me know. It's just Cooper at CanterraMinerals.com or info@CanterraMinerals.com. Be happy to set up a time to chat. Without that, I'll hand it back over to Deb.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. And for anyone that is looking for Cooper's details or coordinates, feel free to reach out and we can connect you. So I had a question just about the drill season. It sounds like you're doing 2 programs. One's underway now and then one's in the fall. Can you drill, what is the drill season? And maybe you can just talk a little bit about how you've broken it up.
Yeah. The drill season in Newfoundland here is really kind of whatever we want it to be. The biggest challenge from a drilling perspective is honestly areas of bog and areas of swamp, more than it is too much snow or anything like that. So those areas can actually be advantageous to drill in the winter when it's all frozen. Right now, our drill timing is really based around when's best to be doing that kind of summer field work and how the timing of those programs line up and results and things like that. But ultimately, you can drill most seasons of the year out there on the site. You're looking at snow, but snow on the orders of magnitude of a few feet, not 70 feet. And it's pretty accessible year round.
Okay. And I understand there's a lot of cover, as you mentioned, with the bog and whatever. How does that impact your ability to drill, or what kind of positive and negatives do you encounter with that?
Positives being that most of the sites out here are relatively flat. I've worked in a lot of very mountainous terrain that gets challenging and expensive, certainly. So, topography is relatively mellow, which is quite nice. And the bogs aren't too challenging, like I said, when they're frozen, but you do have to be careful in the summer. You looking back at my experience in Nova Scotia not that long ago, we almost got away with it. And then right at the very tail end of a winter drill program, we got a bulldozer stuck for 3 days, which was a bit of an ordeal. So barring that, the advantages really are that we can drive out here basically year round. I can't stress enough how much of a difference being able to drive to site makes, and what that does for your costs. And if the guys can just run to a grocery store and grab more food rather than scheduling a fixed wing flight once or twice a week and trying to coordinate someone on the other end to get groceries and get them to the sorry about that, there's the garbage truck outside honking. It takes a lot more moving parts and moving pieces than it does here.
Do your workers stay at site while you're drilling, or do they go back home?
Yeah, generally. So we use a local drill contractor from Nova Scotia, actually. So they're close by. Most of their guys are from there. We have an office actually that is one of the pieces of company lore. Used to be a tavern, which, if you know anything about exploration, is a dangerous game. But so the Purple Frog Tavern in Buckins Junction is our office. It's been an exploration office for the past 20 years, honestly. We acquired it from Norzink. So we have that site there. There's a few rooms there that kind of our main staff stay at. And then there's a couple of different inns and accommodations and bed and breakfast and things in Millertown that we rent as staff ebbs and flows, depending on the size of the program. And that's, a short drive from site.
Okay. And you talked about rig availability and busyness and lab turnaround times. Can you maybe give us an update on what kind of level of activity you're seeing in Newfoundland right now? Is rig availability still an issue? Obviously, lab turnaround times have been slow. You said that you hopefully resolved some of those issues to have faster turnaround, but maybe you can just provide a bit more detail on what you're thinking for the upcoming program.
Yeah, certainly everything is busier out there. When I was out there last week, flying into Deer Lake, which is a kind of regional airport in Western Newfoundland, about 2 and a bit hours from site, you can just, if you've been in exploration long enough, you can kind of look around the plane, and if you don't know anyone, you can kind of see who's probably working in some form of exploration based on the driller's jackets that they're wearing, or the hat from the mine, or something like that. So you can see there's a lot of folks in exploration just in the airport and on the planes in general. Rig availability, we've got a pretty good relationship there, so that's been pretty solid for us. That said, certainly every contractor and everyone is busy out there, and finding good people is definitely a challenge. We've got a pretty good crew of both local folks who have worked on some of these projects before and have our geologists, and then local logistics people and things like that, and then as well some people from outside and some excellent young geos and everything that we've brought in. It's the lab thing, and the lab turnaround times were definitely the biggest piece of the puzzle for us, I think, to try to get our exploration for 2022 running a lot smoother. It was amusing is not the right word, but it was a misery loves company sort of thing. There was a period of time over the past few months where every news release that you check from every time somebody had a news release out from Newfoundland, basically there'd be some complaining from the CEO in their quote about how the lab turnaround times were really hard. And it was like, yeah, I'm every one of these people who's writing this. So like I said, it wasn't, amusing, but it was a bit of a misery loves company. And it's good to know that you're not alone in these kinds of things. And it helps, I think, investors understand that, maybe it's not just this company's fault, or, they're not hiding bad results, or, if you don't have results out in a reasonable period of time, people tend to think the worst, but it was purely just a matter of the fact that we didn't have them. It was nice to be able to see that other companies were having the same issues.
But I believe there's just one lab on the island, or one lab that people were using.
Yeah.
Although I heard that Newfoundland Gold was sending their assays to Australia.
Yeah, so their Eastern Analytical is the primary lab out there and has been for a very, very long time in St. John's. Newfoundland sends some of its stuff off island. That was before my time with Canterra, but that was discussed, I'm aware, for the fall program for Canterra. But ultimately, shipping right now is incredibly expensive, as a lot of people are probably aware. And getting the full core off island was prohibitively expensive. There's a new SGS, which is a big global assay lab, and they don't do just mineral exploration. They do lots of various different kinds of material science. But SGS has now set up a prep lab and a fire assay facility in Grand Falls, which is about 45 minutes to 1 hour from site for us. So we'll be sending our new samples to SGS for that fire assay process. And yeah, Newfoundland's done some interesting things with some photon assay and some various different options in terms of just assay techniques. And that's some stuff we do look at, and we will be testing in some of the upcoming work and with some of the previous core that we have as well, to just get a better handle on, maybe what techniques we could be using and stuff. But ultimately, I think we've got a pretty good flow sheet at the lab dialed in that seems to be giving us good, consistent results. So we'll continue to use that, but albeit with a different lab than Eastern Analytical for the time being.
Okay. Sounds good. Going back to the slide where you show Marathon's Valentine Lake and where you are in proximity, one thing that you were talking about with them having, I don't want to call small, but smaller kind of deposits.
Yeah.
In a centralized facility, I know it's premature, but would you envision a similar concept for Wilding, or would you consider Wilding potentially being feed for their centralized facility? I'm just trying to get an understanding of distance and it's too soon for economics, but maybe you can talk a little bit about that. Yeah,
for sure. You as a junior, you certainly never want to tie yourself too closely to one path for this is our path to success. I think what you do always have to keep in mind is that make the decisions as if you're going to be the one putting it into production. That said, there's obviously a lot of potential synergies with Marathon and with Valentine Lake, with the road system that exists and everything in place. That love to see that option. Love to see us put together a few different deposits with similar mineralogy and processing and flow sheet that they could feed their mill with if they wanted to. That's a potential opportunity, certainly. But we make decisions along the way such that we're the ones going ahead with it. What I do like about their multiple deposit model is that there's more small deposits than large deposits, and that may sound obvious, but the benefit of that is we're not going into this with a threshold that says, if we don't find a 3 million ounce deposit, nothing here is going to work. This is ultimately going to be an economic. Our threshold for what makes a successful discovery is much, much lower. And you can say, okay, well, we have a 500,000 ounce deposit here and a 500,000 ounce deposit here and a 600,000 ounce deposit here at Noel-Paul. And that might totally work into a, almost 2 million ounce mine, or I can't remember what I actually said for sizes there, but 2 million ounce mine plan. Mm-hmm. So we know that option works here and doing that kind of central milling facility. And the other example of that in Atlantic Canada is Atlantic Gold, which is purchased by St. Barbara at the end of mid 2019 there for a great premium and an all cash deal. So folks should take a look at that and see if they see any parallels, I think, to Marathon and where it's at right now, because I think it's quite interesting and quite enticing. But yeah, that's part of the reason I love working places with roads and things like that, is it reduces that threshold to successful discovery, because you don't need one enormous deposit necessarily. You can have multiple smaller ones and plug them all together.
Interesting. Yeah, if anyone's interested in hearing the Atlantic story, Stephen Dean did our keynote for our Atlantic conference. I think it was a year and a bit ago. So you can go back and look on the Adelaide YouTube channel, and he walks through that acquisition and how it kind of changed the area. And I think was a catalyst for a lot of what's happened in exploration in Eastern Canada since then.
Yeah. It was a great success story by Stephen and his team there to put that together. And yeah, very well done. And certainly, like I said, I think there's a lot of parallels between Atlantic and Marathon. So when shareholders and investors be kind of, I think, wise to take a look at that themselves and think about that.
Sounds good. Well, I don't have any other questions. Cooper, is there anything we missed that you wanted to talk about today?
No, I think we kind of covered everything from a high level there. Like I said, I'd always stress that if folks want to get in touch, please do so. Just reach out. We're a Google search away. I'm happy to hop on the phone with folks and run them through the story and walk them through any questions or answers that they may have. And otherwise, I think it's a great time to be, looking at the story, a lot of near-term catalysts here, really trying to keep that conveyor belt of exploration moving, keep the story not stagnant. And we can do that here. We've got the roads, we've got the access, we've got the infrastructure to really keep doing work year round, which is great. And like I said, I think it's a great time to be kind of picking away at things here. It's been a tough market over the past couple of weeks for most companies, Canterra included in that, reflected in the share price, unfortunately. But it's a buying opportunity for people as well then.
Sounds good. Well, I appreciate your time. And if anyone has any further questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks, Coop.
Awesome, Deb. Thanks for the time, and we'll talk to you soon.